All right, we're live for another round of storytelling. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for another week of live stream storytelling. This week we have another special guest, which is Landere. So happy to have you here, Landere from Maine. And Teague has returned for another week. Thank you, Teague, for being here again. You were a guest storyteller last week. And then Danny and me, Caylin. And Chris will be joining us a little later. So a box with his face will be popping up a little later in the live stream. So we'll catch up with him then. So we'll be telling slightly shorter stories today, or at least some of us will, to create more space for more storytellers, because we're starting to add more of us to the mix, which is really exciting. But you'll get a wide range of different storytelling styles and different topics, and we all are living in different parts of the world too. We've got Teague in Calgary and Landere in Maine, and I'm up in Ottawa, and Danny's in the UK. So a big mix of locations and landscapes that we're all connected to as well, which is super exciting. So just wondering if anybody has anything to share before we get started. Danny or Landere, Teague, do you want to say hi or any comments?
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Tell us where you're from in the comments. I always love seeing that, where people are from and what the weather's like.
Yeah, definitely. And we have been making more of an effort to try to be more interactive with the comments. So if you are watching us live, please write what you're thinking and questions you might have or thoughts that pop into your mind. Put them in the comments and we can have more of a discussion around things than just us talking at you. So let us know who you are, where you are. It'd be great to connect. So usually in the past, Chris has been here to do sort of like a way to start us off. And since he is going to be a little bit late today, Teague has volunteered to bring us all together. So Teague, would you be willing to start us off quickly? Well,
yeah.
Not be quickly. I don't know why I said that.
So wherever you are, I'd like you to take a moment with your eyes closed and feel really deeply into your body, taking a deep breath in and sighing out. Keeping your eyes closed and just breathing naturally. Imagine that your body is extending out through your feet or through your chair and sending roots down through either your home or wherever you're sitting. And these roots are going deep and deep into the earth. And they go deep, but they also extend outward towards the horizons, the north, the west, south, and the east. And these roots are starting to come in contact with other roots, other people and other beings that are interconnected with you. And visualize your roots entwining with these other roots. And you can feel now that there's an energy pulsing in your roots and an energy pulsing in all the roots of other beings on planet Earth. And now that we're connected through our roots, take another deep breath. And now while you're breathing regularly, imagine that there's a single strand of silk going up through the top of your head. And the single strand of silk is reaching up towards outer space, towards the universe. And when it reaches the outer limits of planet Earth, it expands, it blooms like a flower. And if creatures were watching us from other planets, they would see these flowering blooms over planet Earth and know that there is life here. And in these blooms and in these roots, we are connected with all things. And now that we have taken a moment to relax and come into our bodies and feel this connection, we can open our eyes again and become aware of our surroundings. and be more prepared to engage in storytelling, this ancient tradition of humans. Thank you for joining me and connecting.
Thank you, Teague. I loved that visualization. I was also thinking with the connecting of the web about like the internet, how I was visualizing that like the roots of the tree, but also how that's relating to how we're all connecting right now from all over the world. You know, we are connected despite being apart. So that was really great. Thank you for that. And I'm just seeing some comments from people. I wasn't able to read them with my eyes closed, but now I can see them. So hello again. Hi, Joe, and hi Amber, and Forever Green Forest School. And is it Ania? I might have pronounced your name wrong. I apologize if I have, but it's great to have you. And Judy, you're back again. It's wonderful to have you all here. So with that, we'll get started. And Landere is going to be the person to start us off with a wonderful story. Are you ready, Landere?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Woo woo.
Hi, everybody. So my name's Landere, and I work for Blue Hill Heritage Trust in Blue Hill, Maine. And I'm very excited to share a story with you today that I wrote for my Forest Day group of students, who I haven't seen for a couple months now, and would be sharing this story with them now if we were still in session. But I'm excited to share it with you today instead. So this is a story that came to me when we were out on our nature trail looking at woodpecker holes in some of the old dead trees near our Forest Day site. Peter, the pileated woodpecker, lived in a beautiful forest. He had plenty to eat and had a quite happy life, but he wasn't perfectly happy. And do you know why? He didn't have any friends. If you have ever heard a pileated woodpecker, or any woodpecker for that matter, you will know that they can be very loud when they're hammering upon the trees looking for breakfast every morning. Pileated woodpeckers are about this tall, and they have a red crown on their head, and they have the loudest hammering on the old pine trees you have ever heard. It sounds something like this, and it echoes through the forest all day long. The other creatures in the forest were bothered by the noise and didn't like to go near Peter, the pileated woodpecker. And this is why he didn't have any friends. One day, he was sitting on an old pine branch, feeling lonely. But this particular pine was a special pine in the forest. She called herself Old Phantom Pine. She no longer had any needles, but she still stood straight and tall and strong. Her bark had fallen away, but she had a silver polished look now, and the whorls of her branches spiked out into the forest. She was only half alive in this world and partly gone on to the next. But when she was needed in the forest, she was very present indeed. And today, she had noticed that Peter was looking particularly sad. "Hello, friend," she said in a deep, comforting voice. "What is wrong?" "That's the problem," said Peter. "I don't have any friends." "Go where you are needed, and I expect you'll find some friends," said Old Phantom Pine. What does that mean?" said Peter. But Old Phantom Pine was quiet and did not say another word. So while Peter thought about this, trying to figure out what Old Phantom Pine meant, he started pecking at her trunk, looking for his morning breakfast of carpenter ants. He hammered and he pecked, going deeper and deeper into the tree. Yum, yum! The carpenter ants were particularly crunchy and juicy this morning, and he was having a delicious breakfast when suddenly a tiny little voice spoke right near his nose. "Hey, this is our home too. Leave us some space, please." And there, right in front of him, very surprisingly, was a tiny little ant talking to him. His breakfast, actually. "My name is Archie the ant, and this is our home, down low on the trunk. Can you go somewhere else, please?" Peter was so surprised he almost fell backward off the tree. But he graciously said, "Of course, I will go higher up on the trunk and leave your home intact below." So up Peter flew and started to dig another hole, looking for his breakfast. Later that night, under a starry sky, Fiona the flying squirrel came gliding through the forest, looking for a place to store her food during the coming spring rain. As she glided by Old Phantom Pine, she noticed, higher up on the trunk, a square hole. She went to investigate. What luck! This is a perfect place for it to store my lichens and fungi and the seeds that I find on the forest floor and those wild cranberries from the bog. All night she glided back and forth, filling Peter's breakfast hole with her food storage. The next morning when Peter came back to the hole in the tree to look for more breakfast, he found somebody else's breakfast stored in his hole. "Ew," said Peter, "I don't like lichen, not enough protein for me." But he decided to leave it be and go higher up on the trunk to look for breakfast. He pecked and he pecked and ate a delicious breakfast that morning. That afternoon, when he was taking a nap on a nearby tree, Bella Bluebird came flying through the forest, looking for a place to build her nest. She could feel that the seasons were changing and knew that her babies would be coming soon. And she knew the spring rains were coming soon and she needed to find a dry place to lay her eggs and raise her young. As she flew by Old Phantom Pine, she noticed Peter's hole in the top of the tree. She flew over to investigate and found that it was a perfect place to build her nest. The rest of the afternoon, she went about collecting dried grass and pine needles, and she had saved a downy turkey feather for the occasion to build her nest. The next morning, when Peter came back for breakfast, he found Bella Bluebird sitting on her nest in the hole that he had made. "Gosh, this is a popular tree," said Peter. But he decided to go somewhere else on the trunk to look for breakfast and leave Bella Bluebird be. He pecked and he pecked, looking for his breakfast of juicy carpenter ants. That night, the spring rains finally came. With drop by drop, the water fell onto the dried leaves of the forest floor until it fell faster and faster, harder and harder, until all of the creatures of the forest were running for cover to stay dry during the spring rains. It rained and it rained for 2 days straight, until the creatures of the forest were quite miserable, wet and cold. Peter sat on a branch all by himself, feeling very sad. And as he looked out through the forest and saw all of the other animals and birds and insects huddling as he was, trying to stay dry, he suddenly had an idea. He picked himself up and flew through the forest to Old Phantom Pine, and he started to peck with all his might. He pecked and he pecked, and he hammered, until the entire trunk of Old Phantom Pine was covered in little rectangular windows and doors. And Peter was so wet, the rain was falling on his feathers and dripping off his wingtips. But he continued to peck and peck until the whole tree was full of tiny little dry homes. Then he flew through the forest, calling to the creatures, "If you need a dry home, come to Old Phantom Pine. There are plenty of places available." Out came raccoon and chickadee, beetle and owl, and they all came to Old Phantom Pine to find a dry place to live for the rest of that year. Soon, Old Phantom Pine was full of animals. It became the fullest treehouse in the entire forest. And all of the animals were so grateful to Peter the Pileated Woodpecker that he had as many friends as he could wish for. And whenever the creatures of the forest heard Peter hammering on the tree trunks, echoing through the forest, the sound didn't bother them anymore, for they knew that he was building one of them a new pantry or a new home or a new nursery, and they were very grateful indeed. And Peter was the happiest woodpecker in the forest. And that is the end of the story.
That was lovely, Landere.
Yeah. Lovely story.
Oh, well done. I've missed
so
your
good.
stories. For those who are watching, you may not know, but Landere's been a really good friend of mine for, a few years now. We met in grad school, and we ran programs together and really have supported each other in our storytelling journeys. And it's been a long time since I've heard Landere tell a story. So I was behind the scenes going, oh.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, and welcome, Chris. Chris is finally here with us, and so it's great to have you, Chris. Glad you could make it.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, lovely to see you guys on the screen. And yeah, I really love that story. I love the glee with which you tell it. And I couldn't just help but smile all the way through. And yeah, I love that. I didn't realise how many different creatures have homes made for them by woodpeckers. They're such excellent constructors, aren't they? It's amazing.
They are amazing. Yes. I was hoping that the story would kind of share how important dead trees are in the forest, because I think so many of us will go out and cut them down as part of our management. But there are so many creatures who depend on them for shelter or food. And there's such an interconnectedness between plants and animals in the forest that I was hoping that would shine through the story as well.
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah, it definitely does. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I'm putting it out there for those of you who are watching. If you have thoughts about the story, we are able to do more interactive discussions. So if you have things that you wanted to share of what came up for you, please type it in the comments, and we can have a discussion that revolves around your thoughts too.
Yeah, good. What kind of activities do you do off the back of that story, Amanda? I'm wondering about hide and seek or stuff like that. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think that there's probably a lot of different things. I put together a resource which is popping up on the screen right now, particularly for parents and teachers that have some ideas about what you could do to go out and explore following the story. Explore, create, reflect, and share is part of the format of the document. And I think there are so many things. You could try building a little nest yourself. You could go looking for holes in the forest. I know that the students that I've been working with, the kindergartners and the first graders, they just love looking for holes in the forest and thinking about who made them and who lives there. And thinking about maybe reflecting on if there's been a time in your life when you haven't had friends, maybe what you've done about it or how you felt about it.
Yeah. Makes me think of, the sound of the woodpecker is just something that it just raises a real sense of curiosity in us all. When we hear it in the forest, it seems to take over all of the other sounds, and everybody wants to try and follow the sound and find the woodpecker. So that's what came to mind for me. I was thinking, where is it? How do we get to it? Like, come on, let's go and look. And what else can we hear on our journey to try and find the woodpecker?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I used to live in New Hampshire, there was used to have a woodpecker that came and hammered on the metal chimney that came out of the stove, and it used to make the most amazing sound all around the forest, and you'd hear it really hammering away. I don't think it ever got through it at all, but I always wondered why it chose that.
That's so they can display their territory. They try and find the loudest thing possible to bang against.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What time of year do they start doing that sort of territory making? Because for me, I sort of notice it happen more around just after Christmas or after midwinter solstice, and that time of the autumn, that sort of late autumn to midwinter, they don't seem to be doing so much of that. And then when I hear it, I go, they're sort of claiming their territories again already. And spring is, we're moving through the next stage of the season. Does that happen in America? Do the woodpeckers sort of make holes only at particular times, or territory noises at particular times?
Here they have like 3 different sorts of sounds they make when they're pecking holes that I'm aware of. One is the territorial one, where they're trying to announce that they're here. It's usually males looking for females. 2, the making a hole, making a home one. So that's pretty loud. They're like flicking off pieces of wood and trees. And then 3 is this very silent, like just tap, 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 tap. And they're looking for creatures to eat. So they're listening to see if it's hollow or if there's things inside the tree. And then, so there's 3 different ones I know about here.
Cool.
That's really interesting, Teague, because I've heard people talk about the like bird language and the languages of the sounds that they make in terms of like the song or the chirps or the alarm calls. But I hadn't ever thought about it in terms of pecking.
Yeah.
That's also a communication method. So love that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's great.
And I've put in the comments, but the link to a document that Landere was referring to, that you've created this document for your classes that you've worked with, right? As a link to the stories, because you're sharing these stories with the groups that you were working with. Is that correct?
That's correct. And also just at this point with the community, with parents who are home with their kids.
Yeah. So you've generously shared a resource with this wider audience as well that you're welcome to access. And the link is just at the bottom of the screen for everybody.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Great. And I see a comment from Jacob saying there was one rattling on our tin roof one year.
Yeah, they're not necessarily trying to make as much noise as possible to annoy you, which sometimes it feels like they're trying to annoy you. They're just like any other creature trying to find each other in this world of so much noise.
Yeah. Did you hear any of that research about the decibel volume of bird calls in cities? That we had some. I heard some on Radio 4 here in England talking about the birds in London and how the songbirds in London have been singing less loudly because of the less noise of the traffic and the less planes above as well. And I was just thinking, how much energy are they saving? And how much do they put out because of the traffic in order to try and say hello to their fellows? It's just a wonder, but interesting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought.
I thought of that.
Wow, lots of questions and observations I'm now going to be making as I notice woodpeckers and other birds out and about. I'm going to be listening. Are you quieter now than you were before? So great conversation. Are we feeling ready to move on to our second story?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Teague is going to be our second storyteller of the day. So are you ready for us all, Teague?
Yep.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Teague.
Thanks.
Yeah, have fun.
Hello, everybody. Last week I told a story about my home here in Calgary, the story of the Big Rock. And this week I wanted to follow on that story and explore the land here a little bit more. It's also kind of following on the footsteps of Landere's story about the spring rains and the seasons. This is all about the seasons of the prairies and how they came to be. And I adapted it through a couple of different sources. One would be the Blackfoot story of Thunder and the Raven. The other would be the Wabanaki story of Glooskap. And then kind of other sources I find would be just my general knowledge of seasonal folklore and seasonal stories. And it all kind of culminated into this story that I'm going to tell you now. Long before there was seasons on the prairies, these seasons that we now call autumn, winter, spring, and summer, there was just thunder. And thunder would roll across the prairies in a constant flux. Sometimes thunder would dissipate and go back towards the Rocky Mountains, but sometimes thunder would stay for prolonged periods above the prairies and just rumble and shake. And thunder would bring heavy rains, and sometimes thunder would bring lightning with them as well. And thunder would send this lightning down to the prairies. And unfortunately, on years when it was really dry and it hadn't rained, the prairies would catch fire, for there was a lot of grass on the prairies. This was the time when the bison roamed the prairies and they needed lots of grass to eat. And when this grass caught on fire, it would cause a disruption for the bison and a disruption for the other creatures that lived in the prairies. Now, one particular chunk of time, thunder would just not leave the prairies. Thunder continued to roll and roll across the prairies, and the creatures just grew upset with thunder. They decided we needed to have a gathering. So they gathered in the foothills in a great medicine wheel, and a medicine wheel that was made out of stones from a river. The river was the Bow River. These stones were moved by the people of the prairies at the time, one by one, and placed in a giant circle, a medicine wheel. And it had the 4 directions on it: north, west, south, and east. And all the creatures stood around this giant circle. And they discussed for 8 days and 8 nights what they could do about thunder, as thunder continued to roll above their heads. Luckily for them at the time, thunder didn't let loose any lightning, but the grass fires of the season had left a lot of smoke in the air, and it was hard for the creatures to breathe and to see one another, but they could hear each other's voices across this large circle. And at the end of the 8th night, it was decided that 3 of each peoples at this gathering, each creature, 3 of each, 1 of each, I should say, would venture towards the skylands to speak with thunder, to have a discussion, to treat with thunder, and ask thunder to return to the mountains, to return to the Rocky Mountains. The first adventurer was Autumn, and Autumn was a human. Autumn wore these beautiful colors of golds, oranges, reds, and browns. And they had a mysterious bag with them, a medicine bag that they carried. The second creature that was decided to go on this adventure was Raven. And Raven was chosen because Raven had a very strong intelligence and knowledge of the Skylands, and knew how to get to the Skylands and how to navigate the Skylands. And third was Bear. Bear was chosen because Bear was so ferocious and could probably be the only one of the gathered creatures to match thunder in their ferocity. This group set off on the morning of the 9th day and encountered their first obstacle. This obstacle was a great grass fire that stretched from horizon to horizon, from north to south, as they headed west towards the Rocky Mountains. And looking, they could just barely see the Rocky Mountains in the back through all the smoke. And Bear decided that they were going to dig a deep hole. And in this deep hole, groundwater started to seep up through it. Next, Raven flew over the fire and looked for the easiest way to cross, where there was the least amount of fire. And Raven came back to the group and said, to the south, there was a smaller patch of fire that they might be able to get through. And Autumn used their medicine bag to scoop up the water and hold this vast quantity of water in their medicine bag till they got to this break in the fire. And all 3 of them sprinkled water on the fire until it became just embers, and they were able to cross. Now the group reached the Rocky Mountains, but they encountered their second obstacle. Thunder had actually been watching this group, and Thunder saw that they were approaching the great stairway towards the Skylands. And Thunder let loose a lightning bolt onto the sides of the Rocky Mountains, and mud and stone crashed over the stairway to the Skylands. This was the second obstacle. Raven scouted out once again and found some caves that connected from one part of the stairway to the top where the Skylands were. Bear led them to the caves using their sense of smell, incredible sense of smell. And in these dark, dark caves, Autumn lit a candle from their medicine bag and walked and sang as they moved through these dark caves. And the songs were songs of light and songs of happiness to help the group get through the caves. And once they emerged from the caves, Autumn blew out the candle, and they found themselves at their third and final obstacle, the gates to the Skylands. The gates to the Skylands were lightning made into metal bars. And lightning, as you know, is extremely dangerous, extremely powerful. Autumn took out from their bag a small acorn and said to the group, "With this acorn, I will grow the tallest tree in the world, and it will attract lightning down towards it." And Autumn dropped the acorn down into the earth from the highest point of the stairway. And within moments, a huge oak tree grew. And lightning from this gate was immediately attracted towards the oak tree and split it in two. And the oak tree fell back towards the earth. But now the gates to the Skylands were open. Raven extended their wings and grew in size to accommodate Autumn and Bear on their back. And Raven flew out with Bear and Autumn on their back into the Skylands towards Thunder. And when they encountered Thunder, it was Bear's turn to do something. And Bear started to roar. And Thunder recognized that there was a ferocity and said to Bear, "I will have a competition with you. The one who can make the most noise for the longest amount of time is the winner." And so they both decided to roar with all their might, and for as long as they possibly could. Thunder's roar was a rumble, and Bear's roar. And down below in this gathering of people in the medicine wheel, they could hear this immense sound from above, and they had to cover their ears because it was so loud. And it went on for hours until silence. Both Bear and Thunder had used up all of their energy in this competition. And Thunder, being a wise being, recognized that they had met their match. They're equal. And not just they're equal in Bear, but they're equal in all of the adventures that had gathered, in Autumn, in Raven. And Thunder proposed something. "I know you have come to speak to me about leaving towards the Rocky Mountains. I propose we split the days here on this earth into 4 different seasons so that we can all join ourselves on the prairies for a little bit of time." And there they created an agreement that the first part of the year after Thunder left would be autumn, season. We know it as fall or autumn. And that time is when such mystery inhabits the world. Fogs roll in, winds come through, and the changing of the deciduous trees' leaves. The season after that, winter. The season of the raven, when raven would spread their wings wide and blow great gusts of winds from the north and the west being the Chinook wind, the north being the cold northern Arctic wind. Season after that would be spring, the season of the bear, when bear would emerge from their hibernation and greet the world all anew. and the last season being the season of thunder, summer. The season when sometimes it's so hot and thunder is behind in the Rocky Mountains, and other times it's pouring rain and thunder and lightning are roaring across the prairies. And that is the story of the 4 seasons. Thank you.
Oh, lovely story. Beautiful.
I really want to go to the prairies. I want to see storms and thunderstorms and stuff like that. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had any sort of big thunder around here. Definitely, I miss it.
Yeah.
Good voice. I like your voice. Yeah, roaring away. What were you going to say, Danny?
I was going to say, I used to live in a home and I had a greenhouse, and in the thunderstorms, I used to go and sit in the greenhouse and just feel the thunder and the lightning around me. It was an amazing experience. But yeah, I don't feel like I've felt thunder in that way for a long time. Yeah. Those sound effects as well were amazing. I love the idea of the kind of a battle between the bear and thunder and who can roar the loudest. It was, I don't know, as I was listening, I was thinking, what is it that they really, what is it they're trying to say? In their competing for the space of sound, what if they just took turns and like, I don't know. I was just, what are we hearing from them in terms of why they need to be heard so much? Made me think a little bit about, I think it was on the back of your comment, Chris, about the birds in London, suddenly quieting down, and if we can give each other time to hold space for each other, I guess, to listen rather than shouting. Bit of a ramble there, but
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the part in the story where they just like exhaust themselves from roaring so much that there's just a silence, and in that silence they're all kind of contemplative. I didn't really describe that, but I was imagining them all just being like thinking, stroking their beards if they had a beard, as the thinking would, and then they're just being like, you know what? Let's just share the time here on this earth into 4 different seasons.
Yeah.
See, where is that story from? Did you write that story?
It's an adaptation of the story of Thunder and Raven, which is the Blackfoot story.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of not really, the Blackfoot story didn't involve, it just involved Raven and Thunder, which is like summer and winter. So I just added in these extra characters and added in some the obstacles and how they each overcame them in different ways, and how each of the people on the adventure, creatures on the adventure, were able to contribute in their own different ways, whether it be Bear digging a hole for the water to fill in, or Autumn to be able to sing the song and bring the light into the cave, or for Raven to use their ability of flight and knowledge to navigate the Skylands. That's kind of all just off the top of my head and based off of tales and things that I've read in my life.
That's an awesome mix of different.
That's good.
Different
one of the bits that I very much enjoyed about it was the bit going through the cave with the candlelight, but the songs, the sort of keeping them together in the dark and keeping their courage up and stuff like that. Yeah, I like that bit.
So there's some
I like lots of it, but that particular bit is one of those that got my imagination going.
There's some really nice comments just coming in from people who feel like they've been transported to different parts of the world through the stories.
What's happened, Caylin? You've frozen.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can see. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know why I'm frozen for you, Chris. But hopefully you can hear me. So yeah, I was just saying there's really nice comments coming in from people who are feeling like they're transported to the different parts of the world through these stories. And I definitely feel like I'm being transported to the prairies, which is not a part of my experience where I'm living right now. And yeah, there's other people commenting about growing up in places like someone's grew up in South Africa where there was a lot of intense thunderstorms. That's Joe. And missing them as it's quite a rare event on this muddy island. Joe lives in England now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really intense to actually like feel your house shaking where I am when the thunder comes at night times. At night, it's kind of like, for me, whenever it's the most intense is when it's night and I'm like lying in my bed behind me here and the building just like shakes because of how loud the thunder is, and you're just like, whoa, spring out of bed because of how loud it is. But then because I've lived here so long, I just kind of like, it's almost a lullaby in a sense. When it starts to move further and further away, then it's like fall asleep because it's a nice rumble.
Caylin, did you tell a story of the seasons as well?
I did. Yeah, a few weeks ago now, I had a story of how the seasons came to be. But in my story, there was summer and winter, and it was the summer and the winter were not sharing the time equally. And so in order to recognize and acknowledge both, they created spring and fall, or the autumn, as a way to celebrate those two seasons. Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago now.
Yeah, that actually was the story that inspired me to look into the story. I forgot about that.
That's awesome.
When I listened to that, I was like, oh, I really want to have a story about the seasons to tell people. So then I started looking into like local folklore and local legends and stories, and this was the one that came up, and then I started adapting it.
Yeah, I love, that was the piece that I wanted to just share really quick of, I love how our stories can be pieces drawn from other stories that we make our own. And I also just wanted to say, the acknowledgement of where the stories come from, particularly if we're sharing Indigenous stories, is really important. And in some of the videos where we've shared some stories that come from, Indigenous communities like Blackfoot or in other parts of the world, we've put some sort of guidelines on sharing Indigenous stories. I know sometimes questions come up of how can you share these stories respectfully without appropriating them? So just to let you know that there's ways to do it, and acknowledging where they've come from is a really good way of doing that.
Yeah.
Landere, you haven't said much. Did you want to share any thoughts before we move on to our next story?
I agree with what everyone has said so far. I thoroughly enjoyed the story and loved feeling that feeling of transportation to another place when we're so limited right now and where we can go. And I also loved your sound effects, and feel inspired to try more sound effects myself in other stories that I tell.
Your sound effects are pretty good, though, with the rain.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first attempt.
That's great. Yeah, the snapping. That was great. Wonderful. Well, I don't know if you saw my comment, Chris, in the private chat, but we were wondering if you wanted to go next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't see that actually, but
not to put the pressure on if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I'll go for it. It's a short one, so
great.
Yeah, don't run away.
Good luck, Chris.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. So this story is a story that I can base all over the world. I heard it once about it being about two wolves and a grandfather and a grandson. And when I was researching it, I found out that what was said to be, it's one of these native stories from North America. It was most likely to be a sort of more of a Christian preacher who came up with this story. But so the actual origins of it, I don't know. But I like to tell it. It's quite simple. And the reason I wanted to tell it this week is mostly because of stuff that's been coming up for me recently, where I've been feeling like the old granddad in the story. So this is how it goes. And I'm going to set it in Australia. So this is the story of grandfather and the two kangaroos. It just so happens that next month I'm likely to become a grandfather as well. So there we go. Here we go. Here's my best kangaroo sound effect on the didgeridoo. One morning, grandfather who was sitting round the fire, poking at it with a stick, waiting for some water to boil. He sat there looking out across the land with a bit of a scowl on his face. Grandson came out of the shed and walked over to grandfather, and he said, "Hey, grandfather, what's up, mate? You look all a bit grumpy. What's going on?" "Oh, mate, I don't know. I'm just feeling a bit rubbish, to be honest. Yeah, I'm just feeling grumpy. And, well, one moment I feel grumpy and another moment I feel quite happy and all right. It's a bit weird." Says grandson. "What do you think's going on then?" "Oh, I haven't got a clue, mate, but I know it just makes me think of there's some old advice that this old Arabic traveller told me once. He said, if in doubt, go for a walk. Do you want to come for a walk? Let's go up to the top of that bluff over there. And sometimes it's nice to get a bit of perspective on things. And then you know what's going on. Do you want to come?" "Oh, yeah, sure. Come on, let's go." So off they toddled across the land. And when they got to the bottom of the hill, grandfather said to grandson, he said, "Grandson, do you know what? It feels like I've got 2 kangaroos in my heart at the moment, and they're fighting, you know. One of them's one of those big old dusty old reds, and he's a bit pissed off, and he's angry, and he's feeling hurt, and a bit sad, and a bit sort of like greedy, and sort of miserable, and he's just taking it out on somebody else. And the other one is full of kind of love and compassion and selflessness and unconditionality. But the 2 of them, they're just fighting away, and that's why I feel a bit grumpy." "Oh," said grandson. "Yeah, I think I know what you mean, especially about 2 animals fighting inside you. Feels like that sometimes, doesn't it, with all those emotions going around you? Yeah, especially as you get to teenage, eh? Yeah, God, that was a long time ago. Come on, let's get up to the top of the hill." So they carried on walking. And when they got to the top of the hill, they sat down for a bit, and grandfather looked out across the land, and a bit of a smile and a twinkle returned to his eye. Grandson noticed this, and he said, "Oh, so what's going on? What's going on, grandfather? And which of those 2 kangaroos is going to win?" "Oh," says grandfather, he says, "yeah, just been thinking about that, and I think the kangaroo that's going to win is the one that I feed, and I know which one I choose today. Isn't it beautiful? I love this place. Look, can you see those kangaroos over there? There's a herd of them. They're not fighting. They're just grazing and bouncing around." And that is the end of the story. Thank you very much for listening.
Love it. I love the sound. I was really imagining the kangaroo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the motto, or the thing that you said in the very beginning about if in doubt, go for a walk, because I feel like that is like a motto in my life, and it solves a lot of problems. So happy to see it show up in your story.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, excellent.
Your Australian accent is great, Chris. You kind of transported me there.
Mate.
Yeah. What did you call the? Did you use like an Australian term for the top of the hill? Was that?
Yeah, bluff. Now I'm not really sure what a bluff is. I think it's like a small cliff.
Right.
It might be. What I think of it as a geographical term is like when you've got a river valley, and then there's a sort of an edge to it, like a small cliff. And I think that's it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we have those here for sure. Bluffs. We call them bluffs.
Yeah. What is a bluff?
Just as you described it. Yeah, just as you described it, Chris.
Yeah.
Cool.
There's some people commenting on the message in the story and the balancing of emotions and self-regulation, and finding that it's a story that is for everybody, but could be particularly adapted to, like Alice is saying, Alice works with little ones, and that can be a useful story in that sense. It reminds me a little bit of, you heard the story that's similar of the wolf, which wolf you feed?
Mm-hmm.
That's another version that I've heard. I haven't heard it with the kangaroos.
Yeah, you can do it anywhere. In this country, I'll do it with red deer, stags, or maybe in Scotland you've got capercaillies, or even with, I think, with shrews. Shrews are pretty feisty little things, so it could be like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really do activities of that, in term, we usually use it as a discussion point, as Alice is talking about there, just to talk about, when we feel these feelings, what kind of stuff can we do to help us, help the feelings and emotions move through us. And it's just quite a nice chat to have around the fire.
Maybe that's going for a walk. The things that we do. Yeah, it could be the activity.
Absolutely.
Or just that realization that there are two, opposing energies, and when we feel drawn to one, there is a way of grounding ourselves with another as well. So I think that's a really important discussion point to have, because I know sometimes children, when they they get filled with anger, it can sometimes be hard to ground themselves in something. So just the realization is the first step, isn't it, really? And kind of giving it an animal always helps. It takes it away from ourselves, and which wolf am I going to be, which kangaroo? It sometimes makes it easier to have that discussion as well, because it's not directly about them, and sometimes it can be hard to be talking to somebody directly about their emotions. But a lovely easy way in is, hey, which wolf are you feeling, or which kangaroo are you feeling?
Yeah. And I often have this kind of discussion with people about emotions, and how when we are I'm really angry, but it's actually we're feeling angry at the moment. We are not our feelings, and they move through us. But sometimes it's really difficult to disassociate, or not disassociate, distance ourselves from just the emotions that are going through us. I still haven't got a hand on it yet.
I recommend this book. I've been reading with forest school classes over the last couple of years, and the same topic of anthropomorphism and using animals as a conduit to emotions. It's called Sometimes I Feel Like a Fox. And it's a really nice early childhood just in general book to read. And it's all about how sometimes I feel like a fox, sometimes I feel like a bear, sometimes I feel like a raven, sometimes I feel like this, that, and the other. And it's written by an Anishinaabe writer who is connecting each emotion and aspect with the various totem animals of their people.
Cool.
That's really cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good link. Sounds great.
I'm looking it up. I'm going to try to post a link in the comments.
Yeah, please do.
Does it have a person at the cover with the face, like a mask of a fox?
Yeah.
Danielle?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to post
really nice art in that book.
Great.
And congratulations, Chris, on being a grandfather next week. Did you say next week?
Yeah, next month.
Next month.
Time. Yeah. We'll see what happens, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you excited for that, Chris?
I am, yes, definitely. I'm feeling mixed about it, because we don't know whether we're actually really allowed to go and visit my stepdaughter, and whether we can support her in a good way or not, whether we have to do it from a distant way. So yeah, my excitement is definitely tempered a little bit at the moment, but yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Little squishy, cuddly things. Yeah.
She'll have to come and have a home birth at your house, and then you all get to just stay there.
Yeah, no, she's very, very happy where she is. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we both Danny and I have really short stories that we brought along today, and we're coming up to our hour. But I know we've gone over in the past, and I'm wondering if we want to just carry on with some storytelling. If we're all feeling like we want to stick around for a little bit longer.
I'm happy to tell my story. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move into Danny's story?
Let's do it.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, go for it, Danny. Have fun.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. So I'm going to tell you a story today. It's a story that I wrote a while ago. I was putting together a number of different stories to accompany different types of trees and how we can identify these trees. There's also a little part of my story which is similar to Teague's as well. So see if you can figure it out or identify the similar point. But this story is set a long time ago, and it always raises a question. It's a time when there were no schools, and a little bit like now, children aren't going to school. And I always like to say to the children, well, if there were no schools, how did we learn anything? How did children develop knowledge or wisdom? And often the answer to that is through experience and through storytelling as well. So this story is a story that may have been told to children many years ago as a way to help them identify and understand a very, very important tree. So this story would have been told by the elders, and it's from a time when there were many forests, big, thick, dense forests, and people would live in tribes inside the forest. And they would choose to live in the forest because the forest provided them with everything that they needed. It provided them with foods and medicines and water and plenty of materials for building shelters. Now, in this particular forest, the people were really happy who lived in the forest. But around the outside of the forest was a huge meadow, a huge field filled with long grass. And the elders used to say to the children, stay within the forest. The forest will give you everything that you need. And don't, whatever you do, stray out of the forest and into the fields of long grass. Because out in the fields of long grass, there lives a beast like no other. A beast with big yellow eyes and strong jaws and huge hands with gigantic claws. They said, stay in the woods, don't go out there, for if you go into the field of long grass, you may wake the beast, and a small child is a tasty meal for the beast of the long grass. So with that warning, the children would stay in the forest, in the safety of the trees. But one day, 3 children were playing in the forest, and they were playing one of their favorite games, which is butterfly Teague. Now, some of you may have played this game. It's where you have to creep stealthily through the forest till you find a butterfly. And when you find the butterfly, you have to chase it and gently touch it on the wing. Well, these 3 children were playing butterfly Teague, and they were chasing 3 butterflies, 3 very fast and agile butterflies. And they were so engrossed in their game that they hadn't realized that they had chased the butterflies out of the woodland and into the field of long grass. They didn't realize they were in the field of long grass until they heard a sound. The children looked around at each other. They looked up. They could see clear blue skies, not a tree in sight. Then they heard it again, but this time it was louder. They looked, and through the long grass they saw these big yellow eyes. Run! They said, and they set off running as fast as their little legs would carry them. They ran through the field of long grass and through the flowers. They could see the woodland in the distance. But as they got closer to the woodland, the beast got closer to them. They ran and ran, but the beast got closer and closer until they could hear its snapping jaws at their legs. They'd almost given up hope. They'd almost accepted their fate as beast supper when they heard a voice. This voice said, "Climb on! Climb on!" Now, the children looked around. They couldn't see anybody or anything. What could possibly be making this sound? Then they heard it again. "Climb on! Climb on!" And they looked, and all they could see in the long grass was a huge tree stump. Surely the voice wasn't coming from the tree stump. But then one more time, "Climb on!" With no other option, the three children climbed onto the tree stump. They put their arms around each other and closed their eyes. Something remarkable happened. The tree stump began to grow. Up, 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 up it went with the children on top. The beast of long grass arrived at the bottom of the tree trunk, and it began to climb. It dug its claws in and pulled itself up. But as it pulled itself up, the tree trunk continued to grow, and it slid down, leaving claw marks in the bark. Again it tried, but again it slid down, the tree going higher and higher. It got all of its strength together and it leapt at the tree again, and it climbed, and this time it got higher than before. But with magic, the tree threw out two huge, long, straight branches. The beast tried to climb around them, but they were too thick, and for the final time he dug his claws in and slid down the tree and fell fast asleep on the ground. The children began to climb down. They checked that it was safe. They jumped out of the tree and they ran through the field of long grass as fast as they could until they got back to the safety of the woodland. There they went into the woodland and they gathered all the elders together and they told them what had happened, how this magical tree stump had grown and how the beast had tried to climb. And the elders said, "Take us to this tree, for we must see it with our own eyes." And the children led them out into the field of long grass. Carefully they tread. The beast was gone. And there in the middle of the field was this beautiful big tree. And the elders looked at the tree and they nodded and they said, "Yes, for this tree is an oak tree. Whenever you are in danger, whenever you are in trouble, the oak tree will always come to your rescue. It will provide safety and life to more species than any other. In the autumn, it will provide acorns for food, and its branches will always give great shelter." The elders said to the children, "Look at this tree and never forget it, for in your hour of need, it will always come." And ever since that day, every oak tree that has grown with the markings of the beast's claws, just as a reminder to all the children that if you need to find an oak tree, Look for the claw markings that come down on the trunk. And that's the end of the story.
Excellent. Yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome.
Nice one. I never realised that about the claw marks. That's so cool. Yeah.
Of course, the young trees don't have the claw marks on. I've had to explain this to children many times when they say, it hasn't got the claw marks on. And also, goat willow also has these like claw marks down them on their bark as well. So sometimes can be confused, but
Maybe there's more than one beast.
maybe there's more
Yeah.
beast. Yes, I'm sure there is. Yeah, but I started a lot of these stories that I've written to try and help people identify trees. We often use them then with games as well. So we play this game called Tree Tag, where with any chase games, children love to have a base. So we'll say the Tree Tag game will be base will be an oak tree. So how do you identify an oak tree? Well, it has the claw marks down it. So then the children get 40 seconds to go and hide, and they try and identify the oak trees while they're hiding. And then we play like build up Teague, but they can be on base at any oak tree. So it kind of gets them using the story to identify trees, but doing it in the games as well. So yeah, fun.
I love it. I love
Better than
the
worksheets.
I love the use of stories for identifying trees or getting to know. I think identifying is a little bit there's a removal of relationship there. So sometimes I hesitate to use that word, but getting to know the trees through stories. And I've had experiences where I've talked about a story where I describe, a tree with the shape of a leaf or things like that. And the groups have then spent the rest of the session trying to find all the ones that are like the tree in the story.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have done that if I handed them a worksheet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's some nice comments coming in of those who are sharing love. Joe loves or shares the love of oak trees, and Alice is saying they have some big live oaks at their school and can't wait to share an adaptation of this story. Yeah, there's lots of ways to adapt it to not just oaks, but looking at noticing what the trees, the features of the trees are, and thinking of a story that could connect to why it looks that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, really cool.
Oak trees are so prominent in storytelling, hey?
Mhm.
It's like, oh yeah. I actually probably shouldn't have used an oak in my story because oaks are pretty rare here on the prairies. I should have used a pine tree because we have lots of lodgepole pines in the foothills and in the Rocky Mountain area. But oak, it just came naturally to me. I was like, oh yeah, acorn, sure.
Yeah.
I feel like I used to use oak, and then since moving to North America and to New Hampshire, and then now up into Ottawa, the pine is becoming a big feature in my stories. Like that's kind of my go-to, like wise old tree is the pine, white pine, because they're everywhere here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can be like thousands and thousands of years old.
And Landere, you had a pine in your story, right?
I did. White pines are very prominent in Maine as well. They're actually our state tree. So they show up a lot in my stories as well, for sure.
That's awesome. Oh,
our tree is the lodgepole pine.
Well, I guess it makes sense why they, if they're everywhere, why it's connected to the place. Joe is sharing about ash trees and thinking about little burned fingertips. Joe, I'm curious, do you have a story you tell about that? Could be one.
It could, yeah, absolutely.
I was just thinking of, I don't know if you know Anna Richardson, who was part of people who wrote Learning with Nature, and she's written another book recently. I can't remember what it's called, something to do with seasons. And but she has a song, or a number of songs actually, where there's lots of layers to the piece of music, and each of the different trees has a sort of a part which it relates to the tree's energy, like the oak tree grows strong, the oak tree grows strong, and then the hazel tree. The hazel tree bit is much more kind of bendy, and then the pine has a sort of wispy sound to it as well. So she's done it really cleverly. I wish I could remember it though. Yeah, look out for it. Or let's hear some songs about trees. That would be nice too. Yeah,
totally.
Trying to think of songs about trees now. I can only think of "Oh Christmas Tree."
Yeah.
Yeah, something will come. Something will come. We'll have to do another version of instead of storytelling. Well, because songs are a version of storytelling, actually. So it could just be a round where we sing songs that we know.
Yeah, we could all do a verse each and go across the screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Well, I think if it's okay with all of you, I think I'm going to save my story for next week, because I feel like this has gone, long, and probably people are feeling a little bit of an itch to get out and about and continue their day.
The cliffhanger.
And that's another reason. Leave you all in a cliffhanger so you come back next week. And it's a really good story. And it's actually, I was going to go down the route of sharing a personal story of something that really happened to me when I lived in the mountains of California. So there's the cliffhanger preview for next week. And we have another guest storyteller that's going to be joining us from Project Rewild. So that's really exciting. And I'm going to, if other, Landere and Teague, if you wanted to come back, we can talk about this after. If you wanted to come back next week, you're more than welcome. And if anyone else is a storyteller and would like to be a part of these, I'm not sure how much longer they're going to continue in this format. I think it depends on people's schedules as things shift and change. But for now, we have next week scheduled, and then we'll go from there. But if you are a storyteller and want to get involved in this group and practice your storytelling, please do get in touch with me, because even if we stop doing live streams or don't do them as frequently, I think that we're going to continue to maybe connect with each other over these. So definitely reach out. And yeah, any other thoughts or comments from Landere, Teague, Danny, Chris?
Just a thank you, as always, for people giving their time to stop by and listen to our stories.
Yes, thank you. It's been a wonderful time.
Yeah, lovely to have you along, Landere. Yeah, really nice. Yeah, thank you.
Good to be here. It's good to meet all of you.
Till next time.
Great. And just a few comments I'll just read off as they come in. Some thank yous from people. Love the growing community on the screen and on the chat. And Alice says from last week, Chris, that her 3-year-olds loved the bullfrog story. So thanks. So yeah, if you are using, sharing these stories wherever you may be, with your family, with your groups, let us know how that goes and how you might adapt it, because it's really nice to hear from you. So with that, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you again next week, same time, same place.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.